your vice president is to fight PM BBC Africa just say you be kese no so course or honum na omoto nsafo no PM or the questions be to two ni no so the same be to two da a speech or the two da next when say so ka kire power papa nti yanko tie sim bi a Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia na nhihye bi a ono so actually no be president or president of the no be go akom na bibia so ituma kosi o manga ne nko tie sim a Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia powerful speech ono so PM BBC ono so e to into editu da
500 consumption. So we are at 180, right? And so you see the direct relationship between our energy consumption and economic development. Ours is so low because without energy, you cannot do so many things, in transport, health, in education, agriculture. There's so much that requires energy. If digitalization, artificial intelligence, all those things that we want to do require energy. So it's a big issue for Africa and how we are able to deal with this elephant in the room. My own experience with our situation in Ghana, and when you look at what is happening across the continent in South Africa, in Nigeria, and so on. First of all, we have to make sure that the utilities are financially viable. The lack of viability of our utilities is a major problem because if the utilities are not viable, they are not able to make the investments that are required. And you know that with the energy sector, the lead time for investment is about 4 years before you actually need the energy. And so if you don't put in the investment early on, but if your utilities are making losses, they are not cost recovering, you have a major problem to start with in that sector. In the utility sector, I think the World Bank estimates that we need about 20 billion annually for the next 10 years or so for us to close the gap. Right, on electricity. And so if you don't have that incentive for the private sector, because a lot of this investment must come in from the private sector.
How do you energize the private sector?
Exactly. But if they see a loss-making enterprise, they're not likely to invest. So that is one thing that we have to be careful and very deliberate on to make sure that there is viability of our utilities. The other thing that we have to do, because we are working individually in countries, it is very important because, some places we have different comparative advantages. There are some parts of the continent where there's more hydro, some parts where there's more gas. But so it requires a deliberate strategy to integrate our utilities. And not only to integrate the utilities, but to integrate the power and diversify the power generation mix towards more green energy. You need to diversify towards more solar, towards more hydro on the continent. We are blessed with a lot of sun. And many places in the Sahel, for example, that you can really leverage solar energy, for example. So I think that the integration of our utilities is going to be very, very important, as well as making sure that there's financial viability and encouraging the private sector to come in to invest in the sector. I think
that's quite interesting. And this brings me to my last question. There is a lot of interest from countries, China, United States, Europe, Africa Conference, Africa this, Africa that.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that we have to work collectively together.
Yeah.
But how is Africa sit at the table during these negotiations? What are your thoughts on African countries, especially the regional blocs, negotiating in trying to bring this private, sector into Africa to go as a bloc so that they can have a better deal than going alone? so that Africa's voice is much bigger and stronger?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, this, it goes without saying that, we deserve as a continent a seat at the table. I mean, we are a major contributor to the development of this world, in terms of our resources, in terms of our population, and so on. We definitely do deserve a seat at the table. And of course, we are a major bloc. The African Continental Free Trade Area has been set up with over 1 billion in population and 3 trillion that we have put together. And so it gives us some marketing power, some negotiating power at the table if we recognize it. Right? You may have the power, but you may still work in very much silos, but once we can recognize and negotiate on the basis of our market power, I think that the rest of the world will listen. So it is in recognizing that we have this to do if we are going into energy, because we have to get our own act together before the world will listen to us. Yeah, I mean, if we go in a lot of the current circumstances, we will not be listened to, but we must be taken seriously, right? And to be taken seriously, we have to do the things that make sense for us to do, and then come together as a bloc to negotiate for very, very important concessions for the continent.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I think I have to negotiate an exit from the interview because it's my time. Yes. It's really a pleasure to have you, Your Excellency, to have this conversation.
Thank you so much,
and we look forward to receiving you at the Africa Policy Journal in the future.
I look forward to that.
Yes.
This has been a very good experience.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the conversation with the Vice President of the Republic of Ghana, His Excellency Dr. Muhammad Bawumia, with the Africa Policy Journal. On behalf of all those who contributed in making this interview a success, especially our team.
500, consumption. So we had 180, right? And so you see the direct relationship between our energy consumption and economic development. Ours is so low because without energy, you cannot do so many things, in transport, health, in education, agriculture. There's so much that